What is the creepiest glitch in the Matrix you've experienced? 10 years ago I was returning home from a road trip with two friends. I received a phone call from my parents asking when we would be arriving. And I explained that we were about 25 minutes away. About a minute later we came around a bend. It was a full moon and we could see the reflection from a lake below us, and other than that the road was completely empty. Suddenly everything went completely dark in the car. No lights from the dash or gauges or headlights on the road. The music also stopped and restarted at the beginning of the CD we were listening to. There was now a vehicle pulled over by the police about 1/4 mile in front of us that hadn't been there a split second before. I assumed I had dozed off for just a second as it was late. I thought it was still quite peculiar, though. After about a minute, the driver of the car tuned the music all the way down and said, "Did that just happen to anyone else?" The other passenger in the back seat sat forward abruptly and exclaimed, "I thought I just fell asleep." We then realized that the clock in the car was reading an hour later than it just had a minute before. To keep ourselves from freaking out, we decided that the car had possibly had a momentary electrical failure and reset the clock to an odd time. Turned off the dash lights, headlights, and gauges, and restarted the CD player. But when we arrived home 25 minutes later, we were 1 hour late. I am missing an hour of my life, and to this day have no idea how it happened. When I was a teenager I had two really intense dreams one night. The first one was about an online friend of mine calling me to say she'd broken up with her boyfriend. And I sang a few lines of Seal's Don't Cry to her over the phone. The second dream was finding a real-life friend dead body floating in her bathtub. I didn't think anything of it up until I logged online that evening and the online friend came online to tell me her boyfriend broke up with her. I immediately asked if I could call her, and she said no. I remember thinking that it meant something, like I could change it. Not long after, my phone rang, and it was real-life friend from the dream calling me. I was completely freaked at this point, but talked to her normally. She was just talking about school and it. Up until I realized I heard a splash in the background. I asked her, "Are you in the tub?" And when she said yes, I felt like my heart had stopped. I asked her, "What did you do?" She didn't answer me right away. And then after a very long pause she told me she'd taken an entire bottle of pills and chased it with mushrooms and vodka. She'd gotten scared waiting for it to hit her. So she called me so she'd hear someone's voice. I hung up and called 911. By the time they got there she was unconscious, but alive. Today she's a mom to a beautiful little girl. And she's okay. Edit. Whoa. Thank you for the gold. It seems like one of many who've had an experience like that before. Suicide is a horrific thing, and my deepest sympathies for anyone who has been touched by it. Oh. I have a story. One time my wife and I were coming back from a dinner night out. When I opened the door of the house, she was sitting at the computer working, as I usually find her when I get home. Nothing unusual, except she was entering the house with me. I shrugged it off and carried on. We went to bed and I told her that I saw her sitting at the computer. And she goes dead serious and told me that when I opened the door, she saw herself sitting at the computer working. Creepiest thing I've ever experienced. The fact that our neighbor's 2-year-old daughter used to point to the TV when it was off and tell us that the person on the screen was making scary faces and that she wanted it to go away didn't help us getting much sleep that night. I was sitting in my car with just my dad and I distinctly heard my sister, who was at home, say, "Are you guys almost home?" I'm scared in a very specific, concerned tone of voice. 2 seconds later, my dad's phone rings. Guess who's on the line? My sister. She said, "Are you guys almost home?" I'm scared in the same concerned tone of voice. I was pretty freaked out. This happened back in college. I was driving home from my cabin in northern Wisconsin through the Indian reservation. There was a man on the side of the road sort of limping along and I pulled over and asked if he was okay. He said yes. He was fine. He just needed to get home because his wife decided she still loved him. They'd had a fight. I asked the man where home was, and surprisingly it was the same city where I went to college, about 2 hours away. I offered him a ride. He didn't talk much. He was tired. When we got into town he started giving me directions. Just down here. It's close, he said. Take a left at the lights. Okay, I said. Right here, he said, pointing. After the white truck. Here? I pulled into the driveway. Yes. Shut up, I said. What? He asked. He was grinning. Like he knew what I was going to say next. I used to live here. I told him. You don't say. Yes. Upstairs. Apartment number 3. Yeah? That's ours. Now he was smiling ear to ear. Small world, he said. He thanked me for the ride and got out of my car and walked through the front door of my old apartment building. I know it was just a coincidence, but it was one of the strangest moments of my life. I got a call from a police officer telling me if I didn't pay some old fines within a week he would come arrest me. The total was $267.63. It was about 2 weeks before Christmas, so I was really sweating it. The very next day I got a check in the mail for $267.63 for overpaid child support throughout the year. Craziest, most unexplainable thing I've ever had happen to me. Was looking at the giant poster of Jordan on my wall, considering if I should take it down. Turned the channel and the person on TV said Jordan's gotta go. It was a show about the country. Took the poster down. Once I was sleeping over at my cousin's house. We were sharing the basement and I woke up at around 3 AM. I remember looking around the room and thinking to myself, I wonder if anyone else is awake. My cousin then verbally responded in his sleep, yes, I am. You actually said it out loud. You were just out of it from sleep and didn't realize. Yeah, this is probably it. I used to live in North Carolina a few years ago and still regularly go back to visit friends. While I was there, my friends and I, who are now in college or are graduated, ran into somebody who we had known, although I didn't know her very well, back in high school. A few days later I flew back home to Texas. The next day I went to the grocery store and was walking down the aisle when I see a girl that looks exactly the same. I did the biggest double take I've ever done. Being 1,400 miles away from the city where I knew the girl lived, it seemed absolutely impossible. As it turns out, after I called my friend about it, the girl I had been talking to in North Carolina has an identical twin in Texas who just happens to live in the same city as me. For a couple hours. I thought I was crazy though. Back when I was in 5th grade, I remember sitting in class about to take an exam. It was one of those where the teacher would write down the question and we would all write the answer on our sheet. After about the 3rd question, I started to realize that I had already seen these questions in the same order and knew the answers. I honestly remember it being like Groundhog's Day, where I had this deja vu moment like I had already sat through the test the previous day. I raised my hand and said we had already done these questions. And I got this dumbfounded look from the teacher and classmates. I looked around like, seriously, I'm the only one realizing this? Oh really? Our teacher says. What's the next answer? I went up and wrote the next several answers that just came to my head. He looked down at his test, verified the board, then cancelled the test. Spent the rest of the afternoon with the teacher and principal being accused of compromising the test. The principal had him go through all his notes and lesson plans to see if he had briefed the test by accident in the past. They asked the other kids. Nobody else remembered. They all scored a T on the test. TLDR, I somehow got a glimpse of the future, or my classmates stuck me by pretending they never saw the test being briefed. Sometimes right before I receive a message from someone I get a really strong urge to open our conversation with whatever social app the message is being sent on. Then a few seconds later I get a message from that person. I get that sometimes too. I think it's just my mind cherry picking data and making associations where there aren't any. But it still feels weird when it happens. Was monkeying on the handrails of a balcony on the 4th floor of my building and fell off. As 2 of my buddies watched in horror. I remember seeing the concrete floor approaching as I fell headfirst and thinking, oh duck, I'm going to break my wrist. Why my wrist? Dunno. Next recollection is seeing my buddies yelling from up there. Are you okay? Are you okay, Dart? I look up. I say, what happened? They did not seem I actually hit the floor. They just ran outside and saw me already standing looking up. Not a scratch. Not a bruise. Nothing hurted. I don't remember hitting the floor. Standing up. Nothing. No memories exist for those 1 or 2 seconds. None of us 3 ever understood what happened. But we all saw it and agree on what happened. I knew my uncle had died. My mom had called me and told me the news. It was very sad. She told me in the middle of work and I told one of my co-workers. He expressed his condolences on my loss. A couple weeks later, my sister mentioned my aunt and uncle doing something. I said, but he's dead. And my sister said no. He wasn't. I called my mom. No. He wasn't dead. To this day I'm still not sure how much of it my brain imagined and how much was real. Did I really talk to my co-worker? Was I even on the phone with my mom at all that day? It still freaks me out knowing that my mind could fabricate so complete and real a memory like that. About a year ago, my girlfriend and I went to eat dinner at Chippettle's. It's in a smallish shopping area with a burger joint and payway neighboring the Chippettle, one of those kind of upper classy type shopping areas. We pulled into the parking lot in front of the establishments at around 5 PM on a Friday evening to find an empty parking lot. There were no tables outside. There were no cars in the parking spots. Not a person in sight and even the lights inside the buildings were off. Completely confused. I took the car in a sort of loop around the building in order to leave. The only thing of interest was a single fire truck parked alongside the building. Headlights on. But no emergency lights. And no one in the truck. It struck us a little odd. Maybe a fire in the building? As we pull around the backside of the building. And then finish looping around. We drive past the front facade of the building. Except this time every parking spot is full. Tables are outside with patrons at them. Food half eaten. There's people walking around. And the lights inside the buildings are all on. But the fire truck was gone. Mind you, it took less than 30 seconds to make a circle around the building. Easily one of the strangest things I've ever experienced. More adjustment bureau than Matrix glitchy. I was moving into a new apartment where my new roommate had a long-haired orange cat named Floyd. I was taking trips from my car to my room moving boxes in. And Floyd was outside. Each time I went inside and then came back out to my car. There was another orange cat outside sitting directly next to Floyd. This repeated until there were 4 total cats. All sitting in a row watching me. Might not be the best one, but this one comes to mind. So the television was completely gone because of a storm, satellite. Mom's playing with the remote flipping randomly between channels trying to find anything that still works. My parents are TV addicts. Okay. She leaves it on a random channel, puts the remote down and says looks like the satellite's out to my father. Just as she finished the statement, the static cuts out and clear as day we hear Kelsey Grammer, Frasier, say not anymore followed by laugh track. In about 2003 or 2004, my mother, who is absolutely not a believer in ghosts or glitches in matrices etc and would never exaggerate a story, told me about a dream she had which I have never forgotten. She said she had dreamt about an old family friend who was dying of lung cancer. In her dream she was hanging out the washing on the clothesline in our backyard. When suddenly he walked through the trees and called out to her. She noticed he was wearing a pilot uniform. She was shocked to see him looking so well. And exclaimed, "Oh my god. You look well. Why are you here? Come and talk to me." He answered, "Sorry. No. I've only come to say goodbye to you. And to tell you I'm so much better. But I can't stay. I've got to go now. Goodbye. And off he walked. Past her. Through the yard and out of sight. For some reason. My mother woke up. Rolled over and looked at the time. 5:23 AM. Later that day she got a phone call from his wife. He had passed away at that exact time.